Hey guys, this is DFD, aka Dark Frozen Depths, back with another Kamihime project video. This is a guide on the Dark Malicious raid, which is high level content because it's one of the higher tier raids in the game. However, doing it will give you some pretty good materials for increasing the power of your dark weapons, and it also gives some pretty solid dark weapons as well. But generally, you do want to do this with light element because with all malicious raids, they have a bit of a penalty if you're not using elemental advantage, which means that you will deal less damage. I've heard that you can potentially still land debuffs, however, don't count on it. The chances are so low that you might as well assume that you won't, unless it's a guaranteed debuff, of course. Then on top of that too is the fact that it also affects the damage you take as well, because not using advantage means you're practically just taking more damage anyways. But again, you do want to try and use a light element for this, and also bring characters that will have methods of resisting or just curing debuffs, because that's the main thing about this fight. It spams a crap ton of debuffs on you. But right here, there's also some basic information for the fight as well. I don't pay attention to some of it because some of it's standard and others is practically just for the damage formula. But it says 850 million HP. That's not true. It's been nerfed since then, and it is 450 million HP. That's the same case for every single elemental malicious raid. I don't know if the HP is nerfed on the Och raid or not as of the time of this video, but that's the only other malicious raid that might be the normal amount. However, when it comes to the elemental ones like light, dark, fire, wind, water, thunder, they're all 450 million HP now. So it's generally about half HP. It's got two orbs before it does its burst, so 2 charge turns. The defense value is 10, and as far as I know, defense value of 10 is normal for this game, and raids tend to have that much, if not less. So there's that. However, there may be a case of a raid having more later down the line. I don't know full details on that raid, but it's something that Japanese side had. So remember that 10 is a standard defense, and if it's less, of course you're dealing more damage. If it's more, of course you're dealing less. And if you do care about damage formulas and whatnot, the attack power is 80,000. So there's that. But you would have to know how damage formulas work in order to really utilize that. Now, there's also something where every single malicious raid has these effects. You can't increase its orb count. You can land debuffs that will prevent it from having turns, but they will never take effect. So you can land your dizzies, your paralyzes, your fire, your flame binds, stuff like that, but they will not take effect. Also, any damage cut that you use, whether it's the normal damage cut or elemental, is half. That means if you have, say, 50% in a normal damage cut, then you have 20% in an elemental damage cut, it's really acting as 35% instead of 70%. So be careful with that. You essentially need double the damage cut, and it may be possible to get enough damage cut in order to outright block an attack, but you don't really need to go that far. But you do want some protection against it too. Especially since a little lesser known fact about this game, elemental damage cuts also act as debuff resistance, so you do want some dark resistance if you can. Now, the resistance effect is not cut in half as far as I know. You can also remove orb counts if it helps, but you don't necessarily need it. You just can't increase the maximum orbs. Something else that's also done between every single malicious raid, except for of course the Och one, that's a different story altogether. But the typical malicious raids, you have a normal gear mode, a blue gear mode, a red gear mode, and then it switches back to normal and repeats the cycle. These gear shifts happen every 5 turns, so you have to pay attention to your turn count. And I mean your turn count, because it won't affect other players. If in normal gear you burst at any time, it will have a strong counter. More on that strong counter a little bit later, But generally, you do not want to burst in normal gear phases for any of the malicious raids unless you absolutely know you can handle it. Some of the counters are very, very punishing, and this one could be too. Blue gear, you always have to meet two conditions if you want to help yourself out a little bit more in red gear. Blue gear is generally the easier phase of the three, though, because the boss is a little bit more relaxed, and it's kind of like prepping up for red gear if you really want to look at it that way, so keep that in mind. But one condition of blue gear for every single malicious raid is to deal 50 million damage in 5 turns. So that's going to be kind of difficult to do, but if you have a strong enough grid, it is indeed doable. So there's that. But that's a standard condition for all of them. The second condition depends on the raid, though. And as for red gear, this is where the boss gets more aggressive. It always gets a damage increase no matter what happened from blue gear, but you get a damage increase if you met the blue gear condition. So try to meet them if you can. If not, it's not too much of a penalty because you'll deal less damage, but it's not too much less. But generally the bosses are more aggressive, they'll do more crap, so you do want to be careful with the red gear. Now then, after it goes into red gear, it will switch back to normal, so be wary of that. So that means after turn 15, it's going to go into normal gear, and then after turn 30, it's going to go back into normal gear. That's just how the cycle repeats. But the condition for blue gear, of course, I said the 50 million, but the second condition is something that has to be done in one turn, and it has to be the same exact turn for these. But you have to use all 4 ability colors. That means red, blue, yellow, and green, all in the same turn, and it has to be done one time. It doesn't have to be done every single turn. Just one turn has to be all 4 of those. If you do that, meet the damage condition as well, you will get a boost in red gear, and that boost is 25% more damage. But if you don't meet the condition, you deal 20% less. It's not too much of a penalty, but at the same time, it is a little bit noticeable depending on what you're doing. But also, again, during red gear, the boss is getting a little bit more aggressive because I do remember it deals like, I think 20 or 25% more damage in red gear. So there's that. But the other thing is that if you have reached a halfway point in the raid, the boss will permanently buff itself, and this buff increases its attack and defense by 25%. In this game, there's a lower limit of minus 50% to attack and defense. You would have to have 75% in order to hit this lower limit now at that point, because you cannot remove this buff. So that said, you would have to have more attack and defense down in order to offset this buff. Then on top of that too, specific to this raid, it will increase the damage it deals every time it lands a poison stack on the character. So if a character's holding three poison stacks, they take up to 45% more damage. It's 15% per stack that the character's currently holding. So one character can take 15% more damage, one character can take 30%, another can take 45%, one can take like no increased damage. It all depends. So you have to really stay on top of your poison removal whenever that happens in this raid, because it's a little bit annoying and can actually catch you off guard, especially considering the fact that whenever there's a transition from blue to red gear, it does an AoE nuke, and as far as I know, this nuke can hit upwards to like 20 to 30,000 damage, depending on your resistances and whatnot. So imagine that multiplied by almost another 50% more damage. So yeah, be very, very careful with that. Now, as for the specifics of normal, if you burst at all during normal, this raid will counter you by hitting everybody with AoE damage, and I do believe it's like 1/3 of the damage that will deal from the blue to red gear transition, but it's also going to land all 3 poisons on everybody, and it's a guaranteed land. So, that said, be very careful because you can take a lot of damage and then the poison can tick after that. And the poison will stick around for a few turns as well, so make sure you only burst in normal mode as long as you can handle it. If you can't handle it, and I mean like having, say, a lot of debuff removal or having high HP like 50,000 plus, don't try bursting. Unless you have those, do not try it. It's just not worth it. The only time you probably could get away with something like that is if you're strong enough or if you have other people carrying you in the raid. But I wouldn't rely too much on that. Just try not to burst in normal gear. In any malicious raid at that. But when it comes to the other two specifics, it depends on if you use a red ability or not. But if you burst, these two won't matter, because the burst will take priority. But red ability use will make everybody get hit, and it's the weakest amount of damage it will deal per target, but it's still more overall damage if you want to be honest. But it will inflict the weakest poison, and it will always do the weakest poison on everybody. It's not a guaranteed chance to land though. You can have some resistances, you can have like block to outright just protect yourself. But the thing is though, this will be what happens whenever anybody uses a red ability during normal gear. If you don't, then it's going to be 2 random hits, and it's going to try to inflict the stronger poisons, one of the two. And if you are hit with the random one, and it's also doing a poison stack, you can probably lose close to, I think, 10,000 HP if you're unprotected, and it landed the stronger poison. So be very careful about that normal attack one. You may or may not want to keep using red abilities if you can. Just make sure you have a lot of protection against different poisons and whatnot. Now, blue gear, it loves doing the random, like the random poison chances, but a single target, so it's a little bit more lenient. It's basically taking that normal attack that it had from normal gear and just applying it to one enemy, not two. So you will see random people getting smacked with poison throughout the fight with that, but it's generally fine. However, if you have to if it transitions from blue to red gear, you will get smacked pretty hard. So be careful of that. It says if no poison is applied, it's just going to consume an orb. That's not the case, as far as I know, because it will still try to hit you pretty hard off of that. That's a condition that every single malicious does. So regardless of whether the conditions are met, you will get hit pretty hard from the transition of blue to red gear. So be careful of that. Now, the red gear, it's going to try and inflict all 3 poisons and hit twice. So this is where it really starts applying a whole bunch. But if it's stunned, it won't apply any poison or whatnot. It just does a weak hit. So that's something to know for all the different phases. If it's stunned, it's not going to apply no poison, and it's going to be a pretty weak hit. Now, when it bursts, it's going to hit everybody and then inflict a poison on one person. And if it's in red gear, it's going to do 2 poisons. So pay attention to that. But it's going to be an AoE hit, and somebody's going to get slapped with poison somewhere along the line, so be careful. But the general damage amounts is right here. It says if it's, and this is based on if there's no attack down, no buffs on your side, all that type of stuff, no increase on its attack and all that. This is the standard damage it tends to do for all these moves, which means if you use a red ability, it will basically do an AoE like 6,000. And if you're doing if it's doing like single hits, it tends to be like 9,000. If you burst during no gear, it will counter with 18,000 generally, and the blue to red gear transition is like double that of the burst one. So again, be careful, because again, these are if you have no attack down, no defense up, no damage cut, none of that. But still be careful, because the blue to red gear is definitely its hardest hitting thing. So completely unprotected, you're easily taking at least close to 50,000 HP from the transition of blue to red gear if you're just doing things wrong. Now, the recommended characters for this came out a while ago, so a lot of characters and souls aren't listed here. But of course, the obvious one is to get Asclepius because she's healing a lot. On top of that, she's also removing quite a few debuffs because if you want to, you can have her generate more heals. You can also just have her with ailment protection as well for everybody, or just keep curing it every 4 turns from a specific ability from the lowest tier of healer. Then on top of that too, if you have her weapon, a specific one, I think it's her elemental weapon, but she'll cure everybody in the raid and also remove their remove debuffs. And that's the thing, souls tend to have abilities that will affect everybody. So Maiden's Prayer is a really good ability to carry. It will just remove a debuff off of everybody in the raid. Having her weapon will do the same thing as well. So there's that. And it's also a case if you want to bring Parashurama as well, because you can be a little bit more aggressive, and then on top of that too, you will also still have the Maiden's Prayer thing, and it will be a little bit faster than Asclepius, I do believe. So it'll be like a 3-turn raid-wide debuff removal. So there's that. Also, if you feel like you're taking too much damage, there's also some other souls that you may or may not use. Like if you want to have some protection but also be on the offensive, there's Caspar. You can just go full damage reduction with Romulus, but it's probably better to bring Asclepius if you're considering Romulus, in my opinion. If you have one of the stronger souls as well, there's also her name is Kong Ming, and she's just stacking up buffs and protection over time while reducing the damage the enemy deals over time. So she's pretty good for that. I wouldn't recommend Benkei unless you have specific characters that would lead to a rebellion team, namely Zeus and Chernobog. If you have those two, then I would consider Benkei. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But the specific with Benkei is the fact that as long as 5 characters are on the field at the time, she will be able to soak all the damage to herself, and she won't die. So there's that. But if you are poisoned, she will indeed die, so be careful with that one. So make sure a poison stays off of her if you really want to do that strategy. But in the case of other souls that may or may not be useful, it depends on if you're more offensive, because there's Yuri and Paracelsus who have damage plus abilities. For the weaker players that can't really do too much damage, and you still want to try and at least get some raid rewards, consider using them. Paracelsus will help you be in this fight longer, though. Then on top of that, too, you may or may not want Medea for this one, because she's got elemental debuffs that you may not have from other characters. And I know one specific character named Iris has a really low chance of landing her elemental debuff. Medea is a decent replacement for that. But then on top of that too, there's also some stronger ones where it's like, if you can really do a lot of damage, Hector's always a choice. If you want to have ability damage teams, then consider Edison if you get her. Alexander's a possibility too, which is basically a better Parashurama if you ask me. So there's that. It all depends. And then later down the line, we'll get even more souls, which will be, at that point, you'll probably just be obliterating the raid anyway. So there's that. But as for characters that you may want to use, Soul, absolutely awaken her for this fight, because she's removing 2 debuffs instead of 1 by then. She also comes with an attack down, and then on top of that too, she can help you clear the blue gear condition pretty easily, because she has 3 different ability colors anyway, so there's that. Tsukiyomi, I would only bring her if you want to have something where it's like you can get more elemental resistance debuffing, but I wouldn't worry about her too much. I really don't understand why she suggested here, if you want to be honest. But Eros is a very, very good one to bring. It's better to awaken her again, but she's given a defense buff, she's given barrier, she gets attack debuff, which is different from Soul, so they do stack. Then on top of that too, her main thing is having a ailment block ability, and if she's awakened, that ailment block also gives you burst. so it will give you burst gauge for that. Atum, she's rapid healing for single target, and she's got an auto revive. That's the main thing. But she also can remove some cooldowns, so that's something to consider with that. So if you do need to keep up on the single target heals, Atum's an option. Shamas, you do want to awaken her if possible, because then she can start she got an auto revive, and then on top of that too, she can also like keep removing orbs with bursts. Just be careful with the normal phase. And then she does heal herself back up quite a bit too, so there's something like that. Athena though, she's like a different type of thing with Shamash, where she can rapidly give a damage cut, but it's going to be a low tier one. I think it's only like 12.5% in this raid. But her main thing is the fact that she can attract all the poison hits, so you can more control that if you want to. Then some other characters too that they didn't seem to mention is Michael Awaken, because she'll give you some double attack buffing, which isn't too great, but her main thing is speeding up your burst gauges if you can. And if she's awakened, she will also give some dark resistance, which again counts as debuff resistance, and it will stack with soul burst, so that can give you a good amount of resistance. Another recommendation for characters that aren't listed here that are pretty early on, I would consider Lug, because if you've awakened Lug, she's got a 30% defense down, and that's the main reason why you bring her. But if you're using an ability damage team, she will be very, very great for that one. Then on top of that too, there's also if you happen to get her from the limited stuff too. In fact, she's probably listed here. No, she's not listed here, but from the limited characters, there's also Ana hit, who will give a decent amount of barrier, but also she'll increase everybody's double attack rate, and she's got an elemental defense down that can stack with other ones because it's turn based. So there's that. There's Apollo, who's absolutely amazing for this fight. She will give you a super potion at the start of every single fight, meaning if you sent in a moat, you have 2 of them. Then on top of that, she has her recovery ability where it's a direct heal, but at the end of the turn, she'll give you some HP back, as well as removing a poison stack. Very, very great for this fight. She's also upping your normal attack damage, and she has a stackable attack down. So there's that. Speaking of stackable debuffs, there's Gaia as well. Stackable defense down, but she can also draw damage to herself, and she does have a rapid fire healing when she's set up properly too. So done correctly, she can keep herself alive pretty well. And Char, she's debuffing pretty nicely too. She has a damage cut and a bit of recovery every single turn, so that's something to know. But she's more suited to normal attack teams as well. I mentioned Zeus and Chernobog for Rebellion. If you have them, they would go well with Anshar. So there's that. Now, if you happen to have this character, but she came from a collab a long time ago, there's Liu Bei, or Momoka, she's called. She can heal debuffs. She can single target heal somebody. She's also given a pretty good defense buff as well, because defense buffs are not reduced. It's the damage cut that is. So there's that. But her second ability also can directly reduce the damage somebody takes, period, point blank. So you could see somebody just not get slapped with anything. There's also some later round characters that would probably be pretty good, like the limited version of Amon for white. Amazing character for this fight would be the white version of Osiris, because depending on the amount of red abilities you use, or how often she can get a burst or whatnot too, you will start stacking what she calls moon magic, which will increase the amount of HP that she heals every single turn. It allows her to start putting elemental debuff stacks as well as attack down stacks. She will start stacking barriers. Well, not stacking barriers, she'll give a barrier, but stack damage cut as well, which is pretty good for all of this. She's great for this fight, if you want to be honest. She'll give you a decent amount of protection. Because remember, barrier will affect the poisons. And the damage cut will also help you out, even if it's still half. But another one now I give a recommendation for this. She's a bit niche, but she's still helpful. If you find yourself struggling with rage a little bit, you can also consider Raphael. She's going to give an attack debuff and a dark attack debuff, so she's debuffing in 2 cases. She removes orbs. She can't increase. She could increase the max orb count normally, but she can't do it in this fight. And then if you land her dizzy, it won't prevent the boss from attacking, but it will give you extra protection, like a little bit more defense for this fight. There's also another limited character too, which is she came from the collab with Ayakashi and Legend Clover. I forgot her name at the time of this video. I'll probably put it in the comments, but she can up everybody's maximum HP just being in the sub slot, so she's just worth having on the team, period. But she also can draw all of the damage to herself, except for off of the poison ticks, of course. But she can draw all the damage up to herself and all of that too. And then on top of that, give herself a lot of like heal and cut and protection and all that. Very good for this fight. Then on top of that too, there's one more that I have to suggest as well. If you happen to have her, there is a 10 who can do a lot of rapid fire hits with her ability damage, but she does self-heal. And each time she self-heals is also going to, I do believe, increase the damage she deals with abilities and whatnot. She's pretty good too. And then a slight honorable mention, of course, is Iris, because even though her debuff chances are low, it's still the fact that it's a 30% white resistance down. So that's going to stack with other defensive debuffs. And then if you land elemental debuffs, they do affect the debuff rates. So that means an elemental white resistance down means that you have a better chance of landing your own debuffs. Dark resistance buff, that means a boss has a lower chance of landing theirs. Keep that in mind. And that's another reason why you use elemental advantage as well, because it also affects the debuff rates. The worst team to use in this fight, debuff wise, is actually Dark, because Light and Dark don't have a weakness on the player's side, but same element has the worst chances for those two. So that's something to consider. Never try to use Light for this fight, trust me on that one, unless you're just really strong. But also, there's elemental, there's like Eidolons that suggest as well. Behemoth and Kieran. Behemoth is wind, Kieran is thunder, and the bonus points about Kieran is the fact that she's in the Eidolon Orb Shop. Bring those, because Behemoth will remove a debuff off of everybody. Kieran will outright block one. So they're pretty good for this fight. Also, if you happen to have an Elemental Kaiser, that can probably help you out too. Again, the blue to red gear transition is going to hit you pretty hard. So the Kaisers will help soak up some of the damage for that one. Then on top of that too, of course, they have elemental buffing, so it's going to reduce the chances you get debuffed. And up the chances you land yours. So there's that. But anyways, that's all for this. I've done this fight. So there's a camera version of that one. But it was the old version at 850 million. So I've done that fight before. Now, my characters are strong enough to pretty much just obliterate this fight. Because I've gotten way, way stronger since then. Same time, I'm a paid player. So that's something to know. But there are some free stuff in the game that actually get you pretty strong for this fight. Because you don't have to clear this raid in order to already have those weapons. But you still should get them. And that would be like... that would be the versatility weapons, if possible. But that's Dragonic Eyes. Maybe a Stinger weapon if you can, to help deal out some more damage. But only if you can fit it in your grid. You do get specific medals from the Malicious raids and the Guardian Plus raids. Anything that's above Guardian level. They will give you Zodiac weapons, which can also help you out. Because there's Vigor and there's Rebellion ones. And those give triple attack as well. So it's helping your normal attacks. So you don't have to do this raid in order to get them. But doing this raid will help you get those. But anyways, that's all for this. More guide videos are going to come soon. Because I definitely need to stay on top of those a little bit more. I admit that much, because this should have long been out. But anyways, again, elemental advantage is key, debuff resistance is key, and then on top of that too, just pay attention to what attack you're using, because you don't want to get smacked pretty hard in this fight, trust me on that. But again, that's all for now guys, more will come soon, and take care.